The Cubs finished 2024 tied for the 5th best starting pitching ERA in the majors, and while they didn't take full advantage of the plethora of star free agent starters available this offseason, they also didn't lose any pieces and have a number of new guys ready to join the mix. In this video, I'm going to give you guys a rundown of what the rotation is looking like for 2025 and what we can expect to see from each starting pitcher, as a lot of their 2025 outlooks do differ from what they did in 2024. The Cubs' number 1 starter is kind of a toss-up, but I'll first discuss Justin Steele. Last year, Steele completed his 3rd straight stellar season of pitching. He was his same old self, limited to 24 starts because of injury, but he posted a 3.07 ERA with a 3.23 FIP. He struck out 9 hitters per 9, walked just 2.5, and quietly continued to establish himself as one of the best lefty starters in the National League. Steele is a pitcher whose skill set works perfectly with the Cubs. His ground ball rate is always above average, his average exit velocity and hard hit rates are always also well below average, and this all results in a pitcher who keeps the ball in the park and lets the great defense behind him do their jobs, while limiting walks and racking up a respectable amount of Ks. Now at age 29, if Steele's fastball-slider combo continues to be effective as ever, then there's no reason to expect any decline from him, and if he can stay healthy for a whole season of work, you can expect to see him at least in the general discussion for the NL Cy Young once again. Someone who was firmly in that discussion last season was of course our headlining star Shota Imanaga. The result stats for Shota were certainly excellent. His 2.91 ERA was 5th in baseball among qualified starters. He also put up a 1.02 whip and led the NL with a 6.21 strikeout to walk ratio. That is something we can certainly expect Shota to carry into next year. It is his defining trait, and that fastball splitter combo he has is always going to make hitters uncomfortable, especially if he has good command of them. What might be a little more difficult for Shota next year is preventing damage when the ball is put in play. His batting average on balls in play last year was 264, which is really low, and that was despite giving up a pretty high hard hit rate and a pretty high barrel rate. Now, Shota was far from bad in either of those departments and actually gave up slightly softer contacts than average throughout the year, but his really low ground ball rate might also be the cause of some issues next year. Few pitchers benefited more from Wrigley's hellish 2024 hitting environment than Shota. He gave up a bunch of fly balls, hard hit ones as well, that the wind helped bring down into the gloves of the Cubs outfielders, and while I'm not saying he's going to get rocked next year, something will probably need to change if he wants to repeat last season's greatness. That is not to say that we can't expect another really good season from Imanaga. An ERA in the mid to low 3s I think is the most realistic thing to predict, and I would fully be satisfied with that. Also, don't count out him mixing in some new pitches and maybe even increasing those strikeouts next year. Shota got an insane amount of chase last season, among the most in baseball, and was also really proficient with getting hitters to whiff in the zone, so I think he can put away even more guys. He struck out 10.6 per 9 in his final season in NPB, which is a staggering amount for Japan, and that tends to increase when premier Japanese pitchers come to Major League Baseball, while Shota's decreased when he came to the Cubs by over 1.5 Ks per 9. All in all, look out for Imanaga's numbers to become a bit more extreme in 2025, with maybe more balls leaving the park, especially at home, but hopefully even more strikeouts and another very good overall season. Moving on to the number 3 spot, we'll find another guy who did an elite job at avoiding the base on balls last year in Jameson Taillon. It was a very interesting season for him because despite not doing anything that well besides simply not walking people, the guy put up a 3.27 ERA in 28 starts. His 3.92 FIP shows us more of what to expect next year, but that's not a bad figure. A 3.9 or so ERA guy was what Taillon was before coming to Chicago and really struggling in year 1, and now that we've seen the worst outcome for Taillon in 2023 and probably the best outcome for him in 2024, I expect him to kind of average out next year and put up a solid but not as fantastic season in 2025. He's another guy who Wrigley really helped out last year. Not only did Taillon give up hard contact and not do a great job of keeping the ball on the ground, but he also just gave up a lot of contact in general, being a guy who only struck out 6.8 per 9 while walking just 1.8, so the ball was put in play very often. Luckily for him, the Cubs have quite the defensive outfield, so while keeping the ball in the park might be a struggle at times, as long as he stays competent in that regard, we shouldn't have too much to worry about. Just don't expect another low 3s ERA. Mid to high 3s is far more realistic and will be just fine. Moving on to the number 4 spot, we have quite the interesting case in Matthew Boyd. Boyd is now 34 years old and up to last year had a career 4.94 ERA, but the starter he is now isn't quite the same as the starter he used to be. It's a huge shame that Boyd was limited to just 8 regular season starts last year because those starts were among the best in his career. Boyd put up a 2.72 ERA and a 3.29 FIP, obviously fantastic, but he also struck out 10.4 per 9, walking 2.9, and giving up an uncharacteristically low 0.9 homers per 9. Homers were Boyd's kryptonite back in his Detroit days. Even pitching in Comerica Park, where it's hard to hit balls out, Boyd would give up among the most in baseball, but with Cleveland and a small sample size, this problem seemed to be mostly sorted out. You also can't tell the whole story of Boyd's season last year without including the playoffs, because he threw 11.2 innings with just 1 earned run, striking out 14 combined Tigers and Yankees hitters. Super impressive stuff there, under pressure. We'll see if he can carry that into 2025. Another thing that will be interesting to see in 2025 is Boyd's pitch usage rates. His usage rates have kind of bounced around each year. It's worth noting that last year his changeup was his second most used pitch behind the fastball, fastball for the first time for him since 2016. In previous seasons, it had been the slider. We know the Cubs love sweepers, so it'll be interesting to see if Boyd pulls out one of those next season. Regardless, health is going to be the #1 most important thing for Boyd. Last year, he was recovering from Tommy John, but if he can stay healthy over a full season of work, I will be extremely interested to see what he can do. An ERA in the high 3s would not be a bad outcome at all, and really, I think Boyd is capable of a bit more. Nevertheless, we will find out who the real Matthew Boyd is very soon. This takes us to the 5th spot. I've talked about what the Cubs can do here in a bunch of different videos, and really, it's not all that interesting. Javier Assad, Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown, and Colin Ray are all candidates for this spot, and the most likely thing that happens here is they all split time in the rotation. I'm pretty sure each of these guys will make some starts, and by the end of the season, we should have a much more clear picture of which starter the Cubs will want to roll with in this spot going forward. Cade Horton should be mentioned as well. His 2024 was a bit of a bummer with injuries and poor AAA performance, but he is far too good for AA at this point with a 1.25 ERA there in 10 starts, so watch out for his stats in Iowa, and I expect to see him in the majors really sooner rather than later if he does perform a bit better. I've said a few times as well that out of all the Cubs options for this spot, I like Ben Brown the best. In 8 starts last year, his numbers were fantastic, and before his injury, it really seemed like he was on his way to capturing more of a full-time spot in the rotation. But yeah, there you guys go. This is what the Cubs rotation situation is looking like. More names could even join the fold as time goes on, and we should again get a much clearer picture as we get closer to opening day. Thanks guys for watching this one. Please hit like and do subscribe if you are new to the channel. See you in the next one, and yeah.